Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Well, Tony, we are recording a show about recruiting just 2 days before early signing day, which is typically right around the time things start just going absolutely insane. So should we let people know we're recording this at just after 2 o'clock on Monday? So if 7 things have happened between the time that we hit stop on this and the time that we get this actually posted, just know that this is the time we're doing it. And if there are wild decommitments or commitments or flips or transfers or whatever, it's not our fault.
It's definitely also not our fault when we look and say, Ohio State is looking about to have like the number 7 recruiting class. That's what they have right now. We say that today. By the time signing day hits and all of these guys finally start making their decisions, teams will drift up ahead of Ohio State, or maybe those teams are already there and the Buckeyes are set, because the usual suspects of Alabama, Georgia, they're already up there. Notre Dame is ahead of Ohio State right now. Can maybe Tennessee, or gosh, what about Texas A&M? I mean, at this point, they have 13 commits and are ranked number 15 in the nation. There's, after this first signing day, like there's how many people are even going to be left to buy if they haven't done it by now? You can't just save your Christmas money for after Christmas. So you got to spend this stuff.
That has typically not been Texas A&M's problem. Like, we're hanging on to too much cash and not doing anything with it. That has not typically been their problem. We should also note that one of the reasons that Ohio State is 7th this year is because they currently only have 20 players committed, which is the fewest, I think, of any team in the top 12. Everyone in the top 12 has more than 20 commits. Ohio State just a smaller class, and I don't think that's necessarily a by choice thing. That is just sort of where they are right now. They would like to add a few more guys. If you go by the average player rating, they are 3rd behind only Alabama and Georgia, and they're just behind Georgia by 0.14. So very, very close to Georgia. And then, several of the teams ahead of them, Texas, Miami, LSU, Notre Dame, ahead of them on the composite rankings, are actually behind them on average player rating. So these are all the kinds of things that if you'd like to see people having an argument about this, visit literally any college message board or twitter.com this time of year, and you will see people having lots of arguments about which class is actually better.
Well, and the thing is, Tom, you have to know right now. There's no way to tell down the road. Like, you need to know. The only way to know is to decide right now and pick a winner, because there's no on-field product that you can actually go to and see. And for those curious, Michigan right now, number 19 nationally in their recruiting class, 21 commits, 7 4-stars, 14 3-stars, and not really making a dent with the playoff performance last year, and then the hype that they've had this year, the performance that they've had this year. So that's, maybe they clean up a little bit on signing day. I'm not sure, but I also think this is a product, this recruiting that we've seen from them not being fantastic is another reason why they've been so recently this year going into the portal so much to get guys that they need to fill holes. And as we talk about Ohio State's recruiting class, I can see some positions where the Buckeyes may have to do the same thing in a year or two. So, Tom, I want to start there. I guess let's discuss who Ohio State has signed or is expected to sign. So it's a class of, as you said, 20 players. Those 20, 1 quarterback, no running backs, 4 receivers, 1 tight end, 2 possible offensive tackles, 2 interior offensive linemen, I think 3 defensive tackles, no defensive ends yet, unless you want to count Arvell Reese, who may be a linebacker from Glenville. He's a 6'3", 215-pounder. Although we said the same thing about Gabe Powers. Everybody said the same thing about Gabe Powers, and he's still, stuck in middle linebacker limbo right now for the Buckeyes. 3 safeties, no linebackers other than Arvell Reese. 3 safeties, unless Jaden Bonsu becomes a linebacker. 3 corners. Right now, Kayan Lee may, by the time you're listening to this, he may be signing or getting ready to sign with Auburn. And we know The Buckeyes are waiting to hear from defensive end Joshua Mickens, who was committed to LSU, waiting to hear from Mateo Uiagalelei and to see where he's going. There was a USC writer put in a prediction for him to go to USC a couple days ago, so that is something to monitor. And that's signing day in a nutshell. So, Tom, when I throw all of that out there, what is, I guess, maybe your first takeaway about this class?
It feels like this is a class where Brian Hartline has done Brian Hartline things again. And then a lot of other places, like the offensive line class is solid, but they feel like they're missing the one top end guy, maybe. I think there were a lot of spots where they kind of had the foundation for a really solid class, and they were in on a number of big big names, five-star kind of guys towards the end, and several of the defensive ends, they were in on 3 5-star defensive ends, plus Joshua Mickens. Only one of those guys is currently committed as of the time we're recording this, and that's Keon Keeley, and he's going to Alabama. So there's still 3 guys that are sort of up in the air, and we'll see how many of them Ohio State ends up landing. They were in on some 5-star tackles. Doesn't feel like they're getting any of them. And, there were certain spots where they needed to have a good deep class. They talked about potentially taking 2 running backs. Well, they're maybe taking no running backs. That's not an immediate need, but that's a spot where you want to have someone every year. You wanted to get a good deep corner class. Well, they've got 2, and Calvin Simpson-Hunt's a top 100 player, and that's a very good start to a corner class. But do they get Kayan Lee? They had Dijon Johnson earlier. He ended up flipping. It has felt like we have talked all year about this as a potential, really great top 2 type class, and it feels like they're going to finish a little short of that. This is still a very, very solid class, and as you said, the portal has kind of changed the math on a lot of this stuff, where how many of these guys are going to be, guys, the top prospect kind of guys. How many of them are going to be playing for a different college team before their careers are done? I don't know that we know the answer yet, because we don't know how much the portal, the velocity of players through the portal is going to change, but it feels like it might remain substantial for at least the short to medium term.
Yeah, the portal is going to change everything, and it allows you to make up for some of your recruiting mistakes. Can't make up for all of them, because there has to be somebody there in the portal for you. And that's where maybe Ohio State is going to be focused on later on down the road, when they have to hope something matches up. And I want to talk about linebacker, because, Tom, right now, do you know the last linebacker from out of the state of Ohio that Ohio State signed? If I ask you that, can you tell me the answer, please?
The last out-of-state linebacker that Ohio State signed. Can we count Steel Chambers in this, or does he not count because he was a running back?
He does not count because he was a running back.
Let's see. Last year it was Sonny Styles and C.J. Hicks and Gabe Powers. This year it's Arvell Reese. So in 2021 they signed
Reed Carrico.
Was he the only linebacker? Okay, so 2020, right before the world ended, who did they bring in as a linebacker that year? What was that? I'm trying to think. I'm going through like the Dallas Gant and Kayvon Pope. That class was 2019 or 18, right? Because Pope was from Virginia, right? And Mitchell was from Virginia. All right, who am I forgetting? Furl Mingus. Yes, Furl Mingus.
No.
Cody Simon. There we go.
Mitchell Melton.
Yes. Okay.
So, and they missed out on linebackers this year. Tackett Curtis being one of them from Louisiana, and so they're going to go like 4 years without getting anybody from out of state, because they're not going to get anybody this year. Unless somebody pops up between this signing day and next signing day. So they're going to go like Cody Simon's entire career without signing anybody else from out of state at that position. And when you're just relying on Ohio for something, you end up falling short. And I don't even know where this team is going to be next year if they lose Tommy Eichenberg. The defensively, they need to bring him back. think they would still be okay-ish without him, but you don't want to be okay. You want to be great, and he would help do that. Running back, they're still going to, if they keep everybody, they're going to have a bunch of people, in that room next year. You're getting Evan Pryor as maybe the guy in this class. Like, that's kind of, since you didn't get anybody with Mark Fletcher flipping to and finally committing to Miami. So maybe you can make up, you can survive it. But man, they need to fix that next year. And it's every year they start out with, they've got these five, like Richard Young at this time a year ago was going to be a Buckeye. And there are other guys who are like, well, they're just going to, if they have to go to those guys as second choices, they'll go to those guys. And meanwhile, those guys end up at Alabama also, and Texas, and, wherever else. And so this year, what is it? Like in 2024, like Stacey Gage is another guy. Like, well, that's their number one guy, and they can wait on everybody else. And every year they just start off with, they're right at the top of the list for the top guys, but they can't necessarily lock those guys down. And then, you stick with one guy like Mark Fletcher for as long as they do, and then boom, he's gone, and you're missing out on everybody else. But they will have a number of bodies, and so I think in a 1 year thing, and we'll see if they end up offering anybody out in Ohio this year. They're looking at some guys, but nobody really outstanding. And maybe this becomes another Mayan Williams thing where you sign somebody late and it's like, hey, we've always liked him. He's always been good. And it turns out that he's always been good, but I don't know how much you really actually liked him until you had to like him a whole lot more. So you've got that. But let's talk a little bit about quarterback time, because I watched a Dylan Keenholz game last night. It was, again, South Dakota, not the best competition, but also, you're playing, your teammates are that same competition, basically, that same level. So you're having to throw guys open, and but he ended up throwing for like 320 yards, rushing for like 197 yards, to give you an idea of the numbers that he routinely puts up. It's very Joe Burrow, Mitch Trubisky-like. Now, those are two very different levels of football, but I was pretty impressed. He never really shows off like this huge, he's never throwing at 100 miles an hour. Like some guys, that's all they can do. So he throws, shows plenty of touch. He's very confident in himself. Like he knows he's the best player on the field, that sort of thing. So he can maybe not get away with stuff, but can be a little bit more calm. I think obviously getting him and choosing him over Brock Glenn and missing out on some guys in 2023 to end up with him, that's probably I assume it's a best case scenario at this point, because you had so many guys in 2023 who are looking at that 2024 quarterback, Dylan Raiola. I'm like, well, I'm not going to go to Ohio State because they've got their 2024 guy. And, it's just one of those things where if you see what's ahead of you, you're not necessarily all that interested in going there. You're going to go look somewhere else. And so he almost, having Raiola in that class, kind of put a cap on the 2023 quarterback situation. And then once it got, you have to go get somebody, you got to go get players who don't care about that cap. And that's what they did with first Brock Glenn and then Dylan Keenholz, or
Lincoln Keenholz. Yes. And I think, you mentioned his stats there from that one game. And I think everyone is going to immediately jump on the 197 yards rushing or whatever it was. To me, the passing number is much more statistically, much more relevant and much more important, because passing, like you said, you're throwing to South Dakota teammates against South Dakota defensive backs. And rushing, you have seen plenty of high school players who are D1 athletes playing against a bunch of future, doctors or lawyers or accountants or gas station attendants or whatever it is, where, you're not playing a lot of other D1 competition in the state of, future D1 players in the state of South Dakota. So you have over the years seen lots of running backs who look like Tecmo Bowl Bo Jackson against competition, and then it's not quite so easy at the next level where guys are bigger and faster and stronger, and you can kind of do it all on your own if you are the one big fast kid in against that kind of competition. It's a little more meaningful to be able to do it with teammates who you have to, like you said, throw open, or who who are not necessarily going to catch everything within their catch radius, all that kind of stuff. So, I'm sure Ohio State fans are very excited to have a quarterback with 197 yards rushing in a single game. But we'll see how that translates to the college level. I'm not saying it won't translate. I'm just saying that's of those two stats, one of those is more meaningful to me than the other. But the rushing yardage, at least he's willing to run, and so that that potentially gives Ohio State a different dimension if he is the starting quarterback at some point.
And if he ever does become Ohio State's starting quarterback, he should have some talented receivers to throw to, including 4 guys in this class, 5-star guys, Brandon Inniss and Carnell Tate. And I think Noah Rogers might be a 5-star by some measures. And then Bryson Rogers. I think you've got 2 outside guys and 2 inside guys. And, with Brandon Inniss and maybe Bryson Rogers being the inside guys who can also play outside. And then Carnell Tate and Noah Rogers, taller guys, 6'2", 6'3", who can play outside can do Z or X. I think I like Carnell Tate as a Michael Thomas type. Won't call him a Marvin Harrison type. We'll just go with a lower tier comp right now with a Michael Thomas. But I know a lot of people see Brandon Inniss and think, another Jackson Smith and Jigba in terms of what he can do in the slot. I'm interested to see them as quickly as we can. I don't know how many of these guys necessarily are coming in for the spring, but I still, we go back to that the first time we saw Jackson Smith and Jigba in the spring, and you knew then that he was going to be special. And so I'm looking forward to my first impressions, seeing these guys catching passes in practice.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how quickly they can get on the field, because you go back through this year's recruiting class at wide receiver, and 2 of them caught passes this year, Tony. Do you know the total production level for Ohio State's freshman wide receiver class, receptions and yardage this year?
I think there were 2 or 3 catches for maybe about 7 or 8 yards. What are we at?
2 catches for 7 yards. Yes. One for 5 for
Caleb Brown.
Caleb Brown, sorry, 1 of 5 for Caleb Brown and 1 of 2 for Keon Grace, and that's it. And part of that is you got a lot of depth in front of you, and part of that is Ohio State really didn't play its depth the way that it has in the past, which was extremely weird to me throughout the year, where it wasn't, this wasn't just, well, these guys are no good and that's why they're not playing, because you really didn't see Kyle McCord play that much. You didn't, they went through running back depth, but that was a function of, hey, everyone's hurt, so eventually you get down to the young guys. Like it felt like the freshman class played less than they have almost any year outside of 2020. Did Bennett Christian? I don't remember if Bennett Christian had maybe 1 catch over the course of the season, the freshman tight end, but you just didn't see those young guys on the field as much. And that was, I think, a function of Ryan Day keeping the starters in a little bit longer and all that. But yeah, there's nothing that says that this year's true freshman wide receivers have, something incredible, some insurmountable hurdle ahead of them. This is not coming in the year after Chris Olave was a true freshman, or the year after Garrett Wilson was a true freshman, or even the year after Marvin Harrison was a true freshman, or the year after Jackson Smith and Jigba was a true freshman. Like, those guys all played significant roles by the end of their true freshman season. And, we're not at the end of their true freshman season yet, but they're still, most of those guys have yet to make any kind of meaningful impact on this team on offense, at least. So, yeah, I think there's a real opportunity for some of those younger guys. And we saw Carnell Tate at camp. We saw Brandon Inniss at camp. These are all guys who, have the tools, have the measurables, have been playing, Carnell Tate and Brandon Inniss have been playing very high-level football for quite a while. So I think they may come in pretty game ready. So it would not surprise me if a couple of those guys, 3 of those guys, really did come in and make a fairly, made a bigger impact than this year's freshman class did.
And I think they need to make a bigger impact than this year's freshman class did, but does that mean this freshman class in 2022 can't make a bigger impact than the 2023 freshmen next year? Like, everybody has to continue to raise their game up, but like, you got to start building that depth. And you're going to be losing, and then we're getting way ahead of ourselves, but you're going to probably be losing Julian Fleming, Marvin Harrison, and Emeka Ibuka all at the same time. So you better be ready with 3 new starters and maybe play Jaden Ballard next year. I don't know. I'll just throw that out there, see if it's a crazy thought. We'll see what happens.
I'm still putting up my hand and say play Jaden Ballard in the Peach Bowl. We have watched. Our next episode will be talking about Ohio or Georgia and LSU, and I think the fast guy who can run the 9 route and you throw the ball to him downfield, that feels like a good guy to have on the field against Georgia. So we'll see if they do that, but I will add him to my the Sunny Styles list of, hey, maybe this guy should play for the first time all year because he seems like he can do some stuff that other guys can't. But now we're really getting sidetracked.
Well, and I know it's very simplistic and it's not how football works, but at some point you would just be like, Jaden, go find number 5 for Georgia. His name is Keely Ringo, and line up opposite him and then just run straight down the field and we'll throw it to you and you will score.
Georgia has a player like this named Arian Carter. Again, we are going to get back to the recruiting class, but do you see the stuff they do with Arian Carter? Do that with Jaden Ballard. Call those the Jaden Ballard plays. Do that. Okay, now recruiting, Tony. We really need to talk about recruiting.
The year of the tight end, Ohio State signing Jelani Thurman. It looked like there was some concern that he would stick. As of Monday at 2:41 p.m., he is still part of the recruiting class. Watched a little bit of him play. He was at the new Army game, Army All-American game, I believe, but he's 6'5", 230. The highlights that I saw was just a lot of downfield stuff from him. So that gives you an idea of the athleticism that he has. He can line up wide and do those sorts of things, but also as a bigger guy that, after watching this year, I think they need blocking as much as anything else. Maybe they get that from Bennett Christian or, bringing in somebody else. They're looking in the portal as well, but an athletic guy there to help with the passing game, which is, I guess, you're not getting it from your receiver, so you better get it from your tight end, right?
He looks like someone, when you see him in person, he looks like a wide receiver. And then you look at his listed height and weight, and 6'5", that's pretty big. 230 is, that's not Cade Stover dimensions, but you're 10 pounds away from being able to handle the Ohio State tight end blocking responsibilities, I think. I mean, what's G. Scott playing at this year? 235 or something like that? I mean, he's basically right in that range. So, yeah, he may be a little more able to get on the field than other guys. And, the downfield passing element, they haven't really had that out of the tight end position this year. I mean, they've gotten, they've thrown the ball a lot to Cade Stover, but most of that has been, the sort of 10-ish yard routes, maybe 15. If you've got a guy who can run, get 20 yards downfield, 25 yards downfield like Jeremy Ruckert used to, well, that maybe gives you another dimension at that tight end position. And we know that they want to play it. So, and that they feel they have to in order to be able to run the ball. So if you can handle the blocking and you can do the downfield passing, there might be a role for you pretty early in your career.
Yeah, and just hold on to the ball when it hits you in the hands. That would be a big help. They're looking like 4 offensive linemen. Luke Montgomery and Miles Walker are your tackles. Now, I know some people are saying Luke Montgomery is probably an interior guy. Ohio State is looking at him as an outside guy tackle. And then 2 interior guys, Josh Padilla and Austin Siereveld. I still go back to my concern, Tom, that we just keep seeing right tackle after right tackle after right tackle and guards. I don't know if there's a left tackle in this class. Now, Luke Montgomery is an athletic guy. Miles Walker is an athletic guy out of Connecticut. But Miles Walker fits into here's the reach. And he's not necessarily a reach, but the one guy the flyer type that is always in everybody's class, that the athletic tackle that maybe becomes something. And if he can't become a tackle, maybe he becomes a guard, and you've got a big body. Luke Montgomery, he's worked for this, obviously has been looking to be a left tackle and was at one point, I think, a 5-star guy early on. So obviously he's going to be a high-level prospect, but I don't know if there's a left tackle here, and they missed out on a bunch of guys in the class. Again, I can chalk that up to first year offensive line coach, but at some point you got to start hitting.
Right, you do have to start hitting, and to the credit of the first year offensive line coach Justin Fry, he got all the Ohio guys. They have not necessarily always gotten what feels like the free space on the bingo card. They've whiffed on some of those in-state guys under the last offensive line coach. So, I think you have to, they got the very solid foundation. Typically the way they're looking to build an offensive line class is you get the, 1, 2, 3 in-state guys who they feel can play at the Ohio State level, and then you go star chasing nationally. And there have been classes where they have not even gotten the foundation of the house built with the in-state guys, and then also failed to get some of the bigger names outside of the state. So, this is not a perfect offensive line class, but it represents progress, and it also represents probably the opportunity of chasing guys in the portal. I mean, they just had a Johnny Cornelius, who is the tackle from the University of Rhode Island, who has offers from, I think, basically every FBS program and also much of the NFC South at this point. He was on campus over the weekend. Alex Glatman talked to him. You can find all sorts of insights from a Johnny Cornelius on the huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Alex has had a long time, relationship with him, where he's been talking to him since high school, because he's a New York kid, and Alex, of course, is based out of New Jersey. So he's someone that Alex has known for a long time. So he's got some good information there. So make sure you check that out. But the fact that they're chasing these guys, that tells you that they really don't feel like they have necessarily a left tackle on the team for next year. And, you're obviously not planning on bringing in a true freshman and starting him at left tackle. That is not generally how this works. But, if you don't have a left tackle in this class, well, then you might be back in the portal a year from now looking for another left tackle for 2024. So I definitely think that is a concern. But, there's also sort of you got to wait until after early signing day and see what's out there. They brought in Enoch Vimahi after early signing day in 2019, something like that. And then they brought in DeJuan Jones after early signing day in 2020. DeJuan Jones was one of those guys who, a little like a Johnny Cornelius, but coming out of high school, where he had, a few offers from, sort of mid-level programs. And then once you get through early signing day, everyone sort of looks around and starts evaluating, okay, who's the best guy who's out there? And all of a sudden, DeJuan Jones had offers from a whole lot of big places that he did not have offers from before then. So, I think there's a little bit of okay, we'll see who else is out there after this is all over. But yeah, right now it feels like this is a solid class, but there really probably is a little still more work to do one way or the other there.
Even Cornelius is a 2-year starter at right tackle for Rhode Island. Defensive line, they've got 3 different guys here, and again, we don't know what's happening with the defensive ends. I think we both expect Joshua Mickens, the defensive end, to sign with Ohio State. There are still people around Ohio State confident that Mateo Uiagalelei will end up at Ohio State as well. So that would be about as good of a finish as you could hope for based on where they are right now, having neither of them in the fold. Jason Moore is listed as an interior guy, maybe a 3-4 defensive end type. He's listed at 6'6", 255, from the same high school as Chase Young, built the same way as Chase Young. He's a top 50, 60 player. And so there are those comparisons there. But I think people expect him to grow into a 3-tech. And if he does, that he does. Will Smith Jr., already a 3-tech, in-state guy, getting better and better. Caden McDonald, the big 310-pound nose tackle type. So they've got 3 different kinds of guys in the class, and maybe Arvell Reese grows into an edge, but he's years away from that at this point. Maybe he can become the Jack or the Leo, but it's a ways away from that right now. So overall, I think interior wise, you get the in-state legacy. That's good. You go down south and get a big nose tackle. You get one of the top defensive linemen in the class in Jason Moore. Solid there on the interior, but they still need to finish this the right way, I think, for people not to hit a little bit of a panic button.
Well, you earlier were talking about how ridiculous it is to try and judge a recruiting class, on early signing day. it's even more ridiculous when there are, we're trying to judge this position group and it's like, well, they might add 1-2 more guys, maybe. I mean, as of the time we're recording this, there are actually, there's lots of smoke around Wilson, the defensive end out of Venice, Florida, going to, not Ohio State, maybe Georgia, but, so far there are no crystal balls in on that. So, we'll see. That was something where he had basically shut down his recruitment because he was doing, he was in the state championship last weekend. So he had, basically no one was talking to him. And so no one really knows what's going on there. There was some smoke around that trending away from Ohio State, but, we'll see how that goes. If they end up with Mickens and either Wilson or Uiagalelei, that's a perfectly fine class. That is a solid class. You've kind of checked all your boxes there, and that that's not a concern. If you just get Mickens, it's that's okay. That's still you've kind of filled all your spots, but how many true difference makers do you have? We'll have to see. Moore does feel like someone who might be a little bit underranked based on where he is, but this is not the absolute grand slam home run class that people had been sort of thinking like, well, maybe if everything falls right. And it doesn't feel like everything has fallen right for Ohio State here, but we got to see how, some of the last dominoes fall in the next day or two before we can really tell you for sure where this one ranks.
And then you've got 3 safeties in the class expected. Malik Hartford out of Ohio, a 6'3"-ish guy, rangy. Jaden Bonsu, a bigger 6'1", 210. Is he a strong safety? Is he a linebacker hybrid? What is he going to be? Cedric Hawkins, an athletic guy out of Florida that can, I don't know, maybe is a nickel, perhaps. In this Ohio State defense, they need as many safeties as they can get. They need as many corners as they can get because somebody has to play that nickel spot. And the way they do their safeties, they just look at next year's team, like what are all of these different safeties going to do? So you can have plenty of options. Corner, Calvin Sampson Hunt, formerly committed to Texas Tech, and then realized I'm too good to play here. And so everybody was after him at that point. Ohio State ends up with him. Jermaine Matthews out of Ohio blew up at camp kind of and impressed a lot of people. Kayan Lee at this point is still committed, but we will see if they just get those 2, Tom, as you're saying, that's fine. But at this point, you're still trying to make up for 2019 and 2020 at cornerback, and you're going to be losing some guys, certainly Cameron Brown. So you're going to want to replace as much as you can, losing Ronnie Hickman and stuff like that. So the way this defense is, you need as many guys as are capable, and the only way to have as many guys as you need is to bring in more guys than you can use. Basically, you just have to like shotgun approach with this 4-2-5 defense.
Definitely, and I think that's even more true with. I mean, you mentioned the cornerback recruiting in 2019, 2020, but the safety recruiting in 2022. I'm losing track of which class was which at this point, but you've got a whole safety class that is just like poof, gone. Jansen Dunn has transferred. Jalen Johnson has transferred. Andre Turrentine has transferred. That is three of your safeties from the 2022 class who are all just poof, gone. And part of that is, I mean, we'll see how their careers end up, where they've ended up. I saw Jansen Dunn just committed to Kentucky. We'll see how their careers end up. But part of that, part of them transferring out also is, I think, the role of the safety has changed a little bit in this defense with the arrival of Jim Knowles. So you were recruited to play in one kind of defense by Kerry Combs and Matt Barnes, and now all of a sudden you're in a very different type of defense. So some of the skill sets that you might have worked for one don't necessarily work for another. So Jim Knowles has to get his kind of guys in here, and so the good news is Jim Knowles has gotten, with the safety position, 3 of the guys that he has given the personal thumbs up to. And I remember watching Jim Knowles working Jermaine Matthews very, very closely, like watching Jermaine Matthews, and I mean, like one-on-one working with Jermaine Matthews at a camp last summer. Jermaine Matthews has the Jim Knowles seal of approval because Jim Knowles has seen it up close, watched it in person, and knows that Jermaine Matthews has the ball skills he's looking for. So, to me, the the final disposition of this class comes down to, do they get Kay and Lee or not? Because boy, they would love to have, had Dijon Johnson stick and have Kay and Lee stick. If you have 4 of those corners, like, that's just, fabulous riches, and everything is wonderful, and 3 of them, whoever the 3 are that stick, great, you've got incredible depth there. If you've got 3, well, okay, then if 2 of them stick, you're still probably in pretty good shape. If you've only got 2 of them, you kind of got to go 2 for 2 there with the depth at corner, what it could be. You mentioned Cam Brown leaving after this year. After next year, believe it or not, all those 2021 corners are going to be draft eligible. So does Denzel Burke leave? Does J.K. Johnson leave? Does Jordan Hancock leave? They all can. It feels like they just got here, but we're already just a year away from them potentially being draft eligible. So I think that's where you've really got to restock that room, because, again, just like you had the class full of safeties that are all gone, you had Ryan Watts, you had Legend Cavazos. One's at Texas, one's at North Carolina. Neither are in Columbus right now. So you have to keep restocking that room with not just quality, but quality depth as well.
Yeah, and like you said, you have to hit on them. And I think they've done that in 2021 with Denzel Burke and Jordan Hancock and J.K. Johnson, all of whom got starts this year. 2022, we will see. Jair Brown sure looks the part, and we'll see more from Ryan Turner moving forward. So you can survive on 2 a year, but they better hit, and you might have to get the nickel from the safeties, because you've got to fill that spot out somehow. And if you're robbing it from the corners, now you've just lost one of your corners. So now you're down to like a 1-man class, and you can't have too many of those. And eventually, when it's time for that class that strikes out to be seniors, like next year, you're relying on so many unproven guys. Fortunately, this year for the Buckeyes, all of those young guys had to play, so they will be better equipped. But so there's your Ohio State recruiting class, 2022-2023 signing class as we see it right now. Now, when you're hearing this, perhaps some big news has happened and many other players are in, but I think a lot of those guys are waiting until signing day. So, you'll be listening. This is a signing day preview, clearly. So, hopefully it goes well for you. Tom, anything else that you need to touch on? We need to touch on?
Yeah, we just want to make sure that you're clear. This is the signing day preview. So this is not guaranteed to be 100% accurate like our Peach Bowl preview will be. That we can guarantee you. This is exactly what's going to happen when you watch the Peach Bowl. Signing day, recruiting is a whole different thing. Not nearly as predictable as college football.
No, we could do some bold predictions for signing day, but that's just no. I am not here for that. That's too much stress, too much craziness. So that will do it for us, everybody. I want to thank you guys for joining us. As always, find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Become a member, say hello to us there on the message board. The thing is moving right now, as you would expect, with signing day coming up, and all kinds of transfer portal news that we're watching closely as well. Find us on youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. And that will do it. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll talk to you guys later.